So I will take my time in this introduction before we bring Tori on that. So thanks everyone so much for being here at the Green Mountain Club Visitor Center for our program tonight, running home of Vermonters Solo Speed Quest on the Long Trail. So this event is part of a series that we do every winter. It's called the James P. Taylor Outdoor Adventure Speaker Series. We've actually been running it for 34 years. So glad that you can be a part of it. And I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Chloe Miller. I'm the communications manager here at the club. So if you are a member and you receive our Long Trail News magazine in the mail or our emails or see our social media, I work on a lot of that stuff going on the rest of my team. So I'll give a quick introduction to the Green Mountain Club. Before we bring up Tori. So I know many of you are members and donors and have been very involved, and thank you so much for your support. Is anyone here at the Green Mountain Club for the first time? Great. Thank you so much for coming. So the Green Mountain Club was founded in 1910 to build the Long Trail. So we're going to be hearing a lot about the Long Trail tonight, of course. So it's the oldest long distance hiking trail in the country. It predates the Appalachian Trail and was the inspiration for the Appalachian Trail. So today the Green Mountain Club cares for the Long Trail, all of its side trails, so trails on Campbell's Hump, Mount Mansfield, Stratton Pond area, and the Appalachian Trail of Vermont as well. Over 500 miles of hiking trails in Vermont. If you've been hiking in Vermont, you've probably seen our trail crews or our caretakers or our volunteers. So there's a huge network of folks that make the trails possible, take care of the fragile outdoor environments, work on the shelters and pretties, and of course work on the trails. So we do a lot of work to ensure that the trails are sustainably built and can withstand the impacts of climate change and increased tiger use. We work to conserve the land that the trail is on so that it's protected in perpetuity. And then we work to connect with and educate hikers so that they have the tools they need for a successful hike. So if you're not already following us on Facebook or Instagram or sign up for our email list, that's the best way to stay informed about events like this. And we strive to provide lots of free and low-cost community programming. It's really thanks to the support of members and donors and people like you that we can do that. So again, thank you so much. Tonight's program is sponsored by Long Trail Psychiatry. So this is a practice, psychiatric mental health practice in Middlebury, specializing in traditional practice and holistic and natural treatment. So thanks to them for being a sponsor of the Green Mountain Club for this event. And then your refreshments tonight are provided by Edelweiss Mountain Deli, which is, down the road in Stowe. And then just housekeeping, if you've never been here before, there's some restrooms right out the door there, and then one more downstairs if you need them. So with all that said, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Tori Constantine. Tori lives just down the road in Waterbury and works as a nurse at the UVM Medical Center. Her first experience backpacking was on the Long Trail in 2020, and she didn't stop there. Went on through hike the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail, and then in 2025 returned back to the trail that started it all, the Long Trail, for an unsupported fastest known atomic record. So Tori will tell you more about what that means and what that entails and her connection to the trail. So I'm gonna go back one slide and just say that next week we have another event here. It's at 5:30, actually, not 7. That's my bad. And it's with the Vermont Fish and Wildlife small mammals biologist, who's doing a lot of work to conserve the bat population in the state. And she worked with Green Mountain Club staff this summer on a project where we were rerouting some trail, working with staff to identify potential bat habitat so that our trail didn't impact the bat population. So that should be really interesting. So with all that said, I'm going to turn it over to Terry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chloe, for the introduction. And thanks everyone for coming out tonight. Like Chloe said, the Long Trail was where I started backpacking and through hiking. And the Green Mountain Club is, I think, one of the like best trail organizations out there. The trails around here are super well loved, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted to move to Vermont. Yeah, all right. So a little bit about me. I'm not actually a Vermonter from New Hampshire. Um, from the Upper Valley, so right on the border of Vermont, New Hampshire. This picture down here is from my AT through hike in 2021, crossing the bridge over into New Hampshire. But I got started hiking with my family growing up in the White Mountains, and spent a lot of time hiking with friends and ran cross country in high school, but never actually camped in the woods or went backpacking until I hiked the Long Trail in 2020. I loved spending time outdoors, but definitely wouldn't have considered myself much of an ultra runner either. I rode in both high school and college, and that was my main sport for a long time. And then I picked up running again after college. I kind of was left with this void of nothing to train for, nothing to do, no coach telling me to show up at practice at a certain time. So I started road running. I was living in Atlanta at the time. I trained for marathons, ran a couple of those, but then ended up back in New Hampshire ultimately, where I was waiting to hike the Appalachian Trail. So I guess I'll rewind a little bit. Growing up in New Hampshire, I worked at the Hanover Co-op. If anyone's familiar with the Upper Valley and the Appalachian Trail, the Hanover Co-op is situated right on the Appalachian Trail. It's a prime resupply spot. And so I saw these through hikers coming through, and they were, stinky and disheveled, and they'd been hiking all the way from Georgia. And all I wanted to do was ask them questions and know more about the trail that they were hiking. So I found myself exploring the Appalachian Trail near my home. And then eventually found myself back in New Hampshire, waiting for my own through hike in 2021. Well, originally 2020. So I had plans and a plane ticket to Atlanta. Was going to hike the Appalachian Trail in 2020. I quit my job in White River Junction at the time, and then COVID ruined all of my plans. So I bashfully went back to my boss and asked for the job back, and found myself going to work and waiting to hike in 2021. But the waiting was too much. I was dreaming of the trail all the time, even though I still hadn't really camped in the woods. It was all I could think about. I was hiking every weekend and just wanting to be out in the woods for longer and be on the trail. And so I had my 2 weeks of paid time off from COVID, and I decided to go hike the Long Trail. It was right in my backyard. I didn't know much about it at the time, but my mom, who's here today, drove me to the Massachusetts-Vermont border, and I started the Long Trail. So this is me back in 2020 on my first through hike. So that first through hike of the Long Trail started off really great. I met a bunch of AT through hikers, Appalachian Trail through hikers, and kind of fell right in with them. They taught me all the ways. I didn't know what I was doing, it turns out. So they really took me under their wing, showed me everything about, setting up my tent to sleeping in shelters and trail food, the best resupplies, all the things that I had yet to learn. I kind of learned from these people that had been hiking since Georgia. So it was great for the first 100 miles until I hit Route 4 and Main Junction and left the Appalachian Trail behind. And the trail was still still really beautiful, still amazing. But I just didn't see anyone. There was like days that I went without seeing anyone, camping with anyone. And it was lonely and some days really, really challenging. So the worst day was going over Camel's Hump. I started the morning going over Burnt Rock Mountain, and then Mount Ethan Allen, and then Camel's Hump. And it had rained the night before, so all of the rocks were nice and wet, not nearly as dry as the summer. And I spent the morning sliding all over the mountain. Was very well bruised by the time I hit Camel's Hump, and coming down Danforth Ridge, my feet hurt, my tailbone hurt, and I didn't want to do it anymore. I wasn't having fun, and so I called my mom and asked her to meet me in Waterbury, and I was prepared to quit my thru hike. So I waited in Waterbury. I spent the night there. My mom showed up the next morning, ready to take me home. And instead, I decided to go back to the Long Trail at the Route 2 trailhead. So I was back in the parking lot, decided to hike up to the Puffer Shelter and spend the night there, and I could make a decision about quitting the next day. So I found myself at Puffer Shelter. This middle picture here is actually the next morning, waking up to a really nice sunrise. It was like the turning point of that hike. So I woke up there were other people in the shelter. I was finally not alone on this trail. And enjoyed the sunrise with coffee in my sleeping bag. So I decided that it wasn't all bad, that for every bad day on trail, there would be a better day. And I decided to keep going. And I made it to Canada. And this is the end of the trail. So then after that experience, I did decide to keep backpacking. I went on to hike the Appalachian Trail the next year in 2021, where I made so many friends, so much community, some of which are here tonight. And yeah, it was a great experience. It really, not every day on the Appalachian Trail was a beautiful day of views like this. But it stayed true to the trail mantra of the trail provides, and there's always there for every bad moment on trail or rainy day, there was always some silver lining, something good. So then I went on to hike the Pacific Crest Trail next year. At this point, I was basically living to be on trail, and so in between my hikes, I was working a lot and then waiting for the next hike. So the Pacific Crest Trail in 2022 was, all new scenery to me. I'd never been out west. It was really amazing, and it was also cut short. So the fires up by the Canadian border were pretty bad that year, and the border and like 30 to 50 miles south of the border was all closed. And the smoke got really bad even before that. So somewhere in Washington, I believe it was Stevens Pass, I got off the trail, did not finish the Pacific Crest Trail. So this should be titled Most of the Pacific Crest Trail. I headed home and found myself back to this place of waiting and trying to ask myself the question of what was next. And so I found myself back on the Long Trail, naturally. I actually had a friend from the Appalachian Trail. This is Dog Bowl here. I did tell him I'd be mentioning him and using his trail name in my presentation. He texted me that he had quit his job, and he said, "I'm going to go make the Long Trail. Do you want to meet in Canada?" So I said, "Yeah, of course." I had nothing to do at the time. I had just gotten back from Washington. And the Long Trail sounded great. Sounded like just what I needed at the time. So I went back out, this time with friends. had this really like amazing experience of being back on the trail where I had started. But also with all this other experience behind me, and got to really appreciate the friends and community I had made on trails, and also got to appreciate these places that I felt like I hadn't really fully appreciated the first time around. So I actually only hiked to Rutland, Route 4 on this hike. But it was really great, and this is actually back in Waterbury, where I live now, so kind of fun. Sorry, I'll go back a slide. So back on the long trail, I also kind of got to reflect on my first hike, and I was thinking about all of the experiences I had back at Puffer Shelter on that first hike. I had met someone that was going for an FKT, or fastest known time. At the time, I didn't even know really much about backpacking, so I had no idea what a fastest known time was. And I was struggling to make it through my 10-mile day to Puffer Shelter and to continue on to Canada. So the idea of doing the trail in 5 days or less was pretty novel to me. So I met this person. I was amazed by what they were doing. I asked them questions, saw their tiny little pack that to me looked like a day pack at the time. And I thought it was amazing, but not anything that I could ever do. And I didn't think much about it again until I was back on the long trail in 2022. And I kind of reflected on that, and not that it seemed easily attainable now, but for some reason it seemed like more of something that I could entertain, or at least consider and think about. And so this is really where I started having the idea of going for this FKT. And then I went to nursing school after this year. So 2023 to 2024. I was in nursing school, and after nursing school, I moved to Vermont. I work at UVMMC now, and I found myself in Waterbury, and I thought pretty good place to train to hike the long trail really fast. So I was in Waterbury, living with roommates from from the Appalachian Trail, and I spent a lot of time just in the mountains, really, really long days in the mountains. So these are some pictures of training. I'm going to tell some good training stories now, because training was truly my favorite part of this whole effort. It was where I got to make new friends in the running community in Vermont. I got to spend long days in the mountains with my trail friends that I already knew in Vermont, New Hampshire. And I also just got to discover new places kind of wherever I was and wherever I went. And I just liked to sit at work and brainstorm where I could go spend a really long time in the woods next to it. So in the winter, it was a lot of road running, but it was also a lot of finding roads that I thought were roads from Strava that were not actually roads. So this is top left picture is a run I planned out for myself that ended up being a lot of coastalling. And then the one on the far right is that's actually right near the Hanover Co-op. This was one of my favorite training days. I did a Dartmouth 50. It's the 50 miles of Appalachian Trail from Hanover to the northern side of Moose Law. That was a really fun one where I forgot my phone in the car. I called that my mental training day, because I had no music and no phone calls to friends. So it was just a lot of time in the woods, and my watch died. So 17 of those miles were unlocked. But I did make it back to my car. The bottom right one is my sink after doing the Monadnock Sunapee Greenway. And I know my mom's thought right now is, man, I'm really glad she wasn't living with me for this one. thankfully I did have hiker roommates who were not too astonished when they found this. But yeah, I did the Monadnock Greenway in New Hampshire in 2 days as an outback. And that was really, really fun too. I had never done any trail race over 30 miles. So I wanted to make sure I could do a back-to-back 50-mile day stretch. And it was fun and it was also muddy. And then the middle one here, I had a lot of weddings last year to go to. So I found myself trying to fit training into wedding travel. And I was at a wedding in Georgia in the early spring. And so I got to run on the AT a little bit down near Love Mountain. And that's what this one is. And then the far left one is my friend Lila, who also just got me fastest in time last year. On Appalachian Trail for the self-supported women's. And because we were both going for these records, we got to do a lot of training together, and that was really special as well to spend time with friends. So this is actually the Worcester Mountain Range, which is a really, really fun hike if you haven't done it before. Not for the faint of heart, but yeah, so these are some fun training days. And then I got closer to the time at hand to head out on the long trail. And so I started focusing my planning on packing and what I was going to bring with me for gear and what I was going to bring with me for food. So this is everything I brought for gear. I did not carry a tent or tarp or any shelter. I kind of chalked this up to I got super lucky with the weather this year and had 5 days of sun. There was no rain to contend with, which I recognize is not a normal year for the long trail. And I didn't have to carry a tent, which was really nice. And I had a 40-degree quilt and pretty minimal layers and gear, as you can see, but I was hiking 20 hours plus a day, so I wasn't really setting up my sleeping setup very often, or sleeping much. And then this picture here is how much maple syrup I brought. Which I love maple syrup, but by the end of this 5-day stretch, I hated maple syrup. And I needed couscous. I also brought a lot of couscous. I won't pretend that food was the only thing I didn't know what I was doing with on this hike, but it was definitely my biggest downfall. I didn't really know how to properly fuel for something like this, and so I just brought things that I would normally bring camping, and they were not enough, and too heavy for what I needed to bring for weight and calorie ratios, and they just weren't the right nutrient sources at all. So learned my lesson, won't bring couscous ever again. Not sure I'll even eat couscous again. And maple syrup is great on shorter training days and not for the actual FKT. It's a little heavy. But anyways, I had all this gear, all my food for 5 days, really 6 days. And I headed out to Journey's End. There's a little shelter if you've never been to the northern terminus of the long trail. It's a little over a mile hike in to the actual monument, and on your way to the shelter right there, called the Journey's End camp. And I had never actually stayed there. Never had any reason to. I was either starting a hike or ending one. So there wasn't much of a reason to stay at a cabin that was only 0.7 from the road. So I decided that it would be a great place to stay the night before I started my FKT attempt. And so my roommate and I headed out, and we stayed at the cabin. I think maybe she slept for like 30 minutes. I certainly did not. It was really hard to sleep. I was super anxious and just waiting for my alarm to go off the whole night. So at 1:30 when it did go off, I was wide awake. I packed in my bag, well, I unpacked it and then packed it again, just to make sure I had everything. And then I hiked the next half mile or so up to the sign. And I started walking, and it was so weird because I had been so anxious and had all this anxiety and energy and worry that I wasn't going to be able to do it. And as soon as I started walking, it all left. It was like, oh, this is what I've been training for, and now I don't have to think about anything besides just moving south on this trail. So it was a really nice feeling, and it went super well for a while. It wasn't all that. I think it was the first phone call that my roommates got that was, a call of distress, was at AppGap. I had probably gone 10 miles or so that day already without water. Great for dry rocks, but bad summer for water sources. So the water leading into AppGap, normally several small streams flowing there. There was nothing. Even the reliable sources were dried up. My roommate, Olivia, had just hiked the long trail, maybe a couple weeks, 3 weeks before I had. She left comments on this app called Far Out and said there was good flow of water sources. I was like, great. So I was looking forward to getting to these supposedly flowing water sources. And there was nothing. It was not even a trickle. So I crossed through AppGap, hadn't had water in a while. Was waiting to start the climb up to Mad River Glen, the top of the ski area there. And I knew there should probably be water at the next shelter, but at that point I also wasn't prepared to count on it. So I was having this moment of like, oh, I really need water. I don't want to start a climb this dehydrated. And I called my roommates, and what came across on the phone was, I just really want to hitch into Waitsfield and go to Canteen Creepy. Along with a lot of tears. So they, they talked me down off of this ledge of needing to get a maple creamy. And they told me, well, we can go get maple creamies when you're done. And I was like, well, if I finish in time, I'm going to finish on a Tuesday, and everyone knows they're closed on it. Yeah, I was stubbornly trying to get someone to tell me it was a good idea, and they didn't. So I decided to keep walking. I made it up. There was not water at the next shelter. There was water at the top of Mad River Glen in the rainwater basin. So I drank probably 2 liters of like warm rainwater. But it didn't care to think about how old that rainwater must have been, because I could not remember the last time I had drank that. And then I actually had this nice moment leaving the Mad River Glens at Stark's Nest up there, leaving the Stark's Nest shelter. I was headed up to Mount Ellen, and there was this hiker that had a through hiker, presumably, that had sat down on this rock, and he was clearly having a moment, a little tearful, like also pulling out his phone to call someone. And I walked by him and I checked in, and I was like, yeah, like I get it. It was really nice to see someone, that was also just having a moment. I made it to the I think it's the Battelle shelter right before you cross Lincoln Gap. And I was not on that was the first day that I was really off of my schedule of where I wanted to be and when. So I was starting to kind of, wouldn't say panic, but I was starting to have like this kind of calculation going in my brain of like, can I still make it if I don't make it to this place by this time, or if I stop here tonight, like where do I need to get to tomorrow? So I started doing all these equations in my brain, which was way too tired to be doing any math. And I ended up sitting at the hotel shelter for a little longer than expected, mostly to drink a lot of water. And I was sitting there and decided, I'll just get as far as I can in the breathless tonight, and then I'll sleep somewhere, keep going in the morning. And I don't know what the magic is in the bread loaves, but I got into the bread loaves, and as soon as it got dark, I had like a second wind. I couldn't stop. I went straight to the bread loaves. And I took my next sleep at the top of Middlebury Snowball. So it was it was really magical. I ended up going back to the bread loaves later in the summer, and just similar experience, got to like go through them at night, and it was so much fun. But yeah, it might be one of my favorite sections of the long trail. Anyway, so Middlebury Snowball was the first place that I took off my clothes. And I finally decided to look at my feet. I won't say it was the first place I took off my shoes. It was the first place I took off both my shoes and my socks. I decided that it was time to take a good look and see what was going on underneath my my socks, and this is what I saw. It was cute little blister there on my second toe. I hadn't felt it much, so it's fine. There were some other blisters that looked pretty bad on my heels, and I taped those up. And I figured, how bad can this one get? It didn't look that bad. So I kept going, put my socks back on. And when I checked it later, not really totally sure where this one's from, but it had gotten a lot bigger. So at this point, I was calling it my cherry tomato. And honestly, I don't think I took a picture of it, but I think it did get bigger than the middle picture before it actually popped. But then at some point it popped. I felt it pop. I mean, it was, yeah, you could feel it. And I did end up losing this tiny toenail, just like fully fell right off from the root. It's still growing back.
Did it taste like a cherry tomato?
Questions after. Yeah, so this is the PG foot content that I could provide. My feet looked way worse than this. I had this fifth toe here when I finished was infected. And I had several blood blisters on my heels. But yeah, by the end, my feet were my limiting factor. It was all I could think about. And all of my brain power was spent on how do I not think about my feet. And I spent a lot of time trying to talk to other people and struggling with how do I slow down just to hike with this person to have a distraction from my feet, or do I like continue trying to move fast? And it got to the point where I couldn't even move fast because my feet hurt so bad. And the worst part was definitely the descent into Route 9, which was my final day, going down into Route 9 and back up. And that descent was so slow, and so painful. And on the other side, I just remember getting past it, being actually like grateful for those stone stairs that just go straight up out of Route 9. And then I got up to Herman Hill, I believe, after Route 9. And I did the craziest thing. I took off my shoes and just started walking barefoot. And I convinced myself that that actually felt better for a while, until it definitely didn't. And I also saw some hikers who gave me some weird looks, and then finally ran across a hiker who it turns out knew one of my roommates, and it's like, oh, yeah, you're Chewy, you're going for the fastest amount of time. He's like, you should push your shoes on. And so that's what they took. I put the shoes on. But it was so painful. I didn't know what to do. But again, there was nothing that made my feet feel better. And I was so close to the end. I knew I was going to finish, but it was so challenging to make it there. So I did eventually get there. Shortly before I got to the last shelter, which I don't remember the name of, or second to last shelter. All of my electronics besides my watch died. So I had not allotted my battery usage very well in the first half of my hike, and by the second half, I was rationing my battery power. So I had a few different things that were pretty vital to my hike to keep charged. I had 2 headlamps. I used them both each night. I usually have to charge one while the other one was on. And I go through like 1.5 full charges of those every night. And then I had my cell phone. I had 2 tracking devices because that's what they require for a Premier route, is that you have like a tracking device and a backup tracking device. So I had my Garmin InReach, and then I also had my watch, and then I had my, oh, there was something else. I guess those were all the things, but yeah, basically I didn't have much battery left. I needed to keep a headlamp charged, and I needed to keep at least a tracking device on, and I couldn't charge my phone anymore. So I had 1% on my phone, and I had 1% for about 2 days. And I kept my phone off for that reason. And I was saving that 1% for like when I needed it most. And I got here and I was like, well, I do need to make sure I get a ride from the southern terminus. So I turned on my phone and very quickly wrote a text to my roommate saying ETA 8 o'clock. And pressed send, and my phone died like seconds later. Oh, I think I said like tracker's going to die, so that they know that like my tracker that was giving points to other people was gonna die. They wouldn't be able to like see where I was anymore. And they would just have to trust that I'd be there sometime around 8 p.m. And so my tracker did die. Sorry to my mom, who was, I think, the only person that slept less than me for 5 days. Yeah, my tracker died. My watch did not, so thankfully I still had that data point, and I made it to the end around 9 p.m. So I wasn't that far off from my ETA, and I'm pretty good at running late to things, so it was pretty on brand. But I got there around 9, told them 8. They were, waiting for me in the rain. It did rain once while I was on my attempt, and it was for the last 2 hours as I was hiking into the southern terminus. But it felt right at that point. I couldn't end the long trail without a little bit of rain. So I made it. I had asked my roommates for pizza, which they dutifully provided. And I got there and, sat down and started taking my shoes off because I was done. And my roommate said, we have to hike out. So yeah, I did. I had to put my shoes back on and walk the 3.5 miles. But it was pretty slow at that point. yeah, it was I didn't know how this moment was gonna feel, and I think after a lot of hikes, people assume that the end is this like amazing feeling of like accomplishment and achievement, that it all comes together in this moment. And I think there's also a lot of posts that kind of make it seem that way. But like I said, my favorite part of the whole thing was training for it, and when it was over, it was this weird void of feeling the accomplishment of what I had done, but not really associating with this thing that I had just achieved either. And it was more of a what comes next now. There had definitely been some doubt of whether or not self-doubt on my part of whether or not I could actually do this. And so accomplishing it, I had no idea kind of what I could do, and then it left this this question mark of possibilities, but also yeah, it was a really weird feeling, and not something I've totally come to terms with yet. So yeah, this is my long trail FKT experience. I ended up shortly after the my time on the long trail this summer. I was back on the long trail with Tara and her crew, and that was a really fun experience to see the FKT world from like both different perspectives. So my attempt was unsupported, Tara's was supported. It's really cool to be a part of a supported crew as well. And yeah, I had a great time on the long trail this summer. And this is also a picture from Bromley.
Okay, let's give one more round of applause for So you have 15-ish minutes for questions, so I will turn it over to you to moderate your comment. And
Good. Anyone have any questions? Yeah. What's the right food? I still don't know the answer to that one. I can open that one up to anyone who feels like they know the answer to that, but it's not.
On the food,
Yeah.
I'm thinking, you said you didn't like couscous. How are you preparing it, and when did it start to question? That's this area.
Why I have my dear roommate Slingshot, who's in the crowd tonight. Thank you, Slingshot. I know you meant well. Horrible. I should say I still like couscous, grilled couscous specifically though. Consider myself a bit of a couscous snob now. Yeah, it was the tiny little like grainy couscous that you just have to add water to really, which I've done on a lot of hikes before. Super great for cold soaking, which I didn't bring a stove with me. And that was my thought, was like, oh, I can add protein powder to this.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had like protein powder and I think like nutritional yeast in there. And I had water, and I think I made it through one of the bags that I had brought, and I brought 5 bags of it. And it took me the first 3 days to get through the first bag, and that was when I knew that I was going to carry most of that couscous all the way through with me, not eat it. And most of my calories were in the couscous. Big mistake.
What were your calories you wanted to get a day?
I didn't have any numbers there. That's another. Yeah, I thought about that after, so, it wasn't the most efficient water source.
You described your early experience on the trails as like something that was super kind of like special and. Like you're just thinking about it all the time and just thinking about being on the trails and drawn to it and. Then your. FKT attempt was like. A place where you like suffer and completely like kind of broke down, feet, probably some emotions. I mean, is there any like reflections on like the dichotomy of like both of the trail being both of those things?
Yeah, I think on that first long trail hike, I suffered in a really different way, like looking back on it now, I definitely wasn't like physically broken in the way that I thought I was at the time. But mentally I was broken. But both times it felt like I kept going through something that in some moment felt insurmountable. And so, yeah, it was cool that what that limit was had changed so much in 5 years. And getting to experience it like on the same trail in the same places. It's pretty special.
How much weight did you carry, and with the water sources so dry, did you have to carry more water than you expected?
I probably should have carried more water. And I didn't have the capacity to carry more water, so I only had the capacity for a liter at a time. Which was a lot of times what I tried to leave a water source with was a full liter. But I had prepared around Waterbury, like on the long trail. And while it had definitely been a dry summer, the water sources had been pretty predictable. Pretty much up until I left, and then like that week was when it was really starting to get bad. And I actually heard from some people who went out after me that it was getting even worse in the following weeks because we continued to just have no rain. So yeah, it was. I didn't really expect that to be a problem I encountered on the long trail, just because it is so wet generally. There's like a plethora of water sources in any normal year. And for weight of my pack, I think if I had to guess, just from like having backpacked a lot, I didn't weigh my pack. If I had to guess, I would say it was around 20 pounds when I started. With all my food, a little over 20 probably.
Thank you for the nice talk. It was nice to see the trajectory across all the different trips that you've done. I mean, this last week was really, you spent some time talking about things that that you wish you brought, like more water and anything that wasn't goose. Other than maple syrup, is there something you brought that you realized didn't end up using as much as you probably was wanting to use it?
That's a good question. I don't think there was anything I didn't use much. I even used my raincoat. I like went back and forth about like whether wearing a puffy or a raincoat. And a raincoat was like a good extra like wind insulating layer when I needed it. I'd say if anything, there were things that I like regretted not bringing, more so than not using. I brought a 40-degree quilt, and while like looking at the weather, that seemed like enough. I think just in like the calorie deficit that I was in, it was really hard to stay warm at night. So like even some of the nights that I felt like, oh, I'm kind of done with where I wanted to be a little bit early, like maybe I'll get a good sleep tonight. I just like woke up cold and unable to really sleep.
You were trained as a nurse.
Right.
and
Yeah.
nutrition planning side.
So this is my great expert.
It's your question.
I was wondering if you had any concerns about damaging your body, your knees or your legs. In the long term, I mean, you know, does it, as you get older, progressively arthritis or something like that can set in? I'm just wondering what training led you to think and what you thought about what would be the consequence of running?
Yeah. I mean, I do a lot of running and hiking and just like long days on my feet in general. And I guess I didn't think much about the future consequence. I figured there would be some short-term consequences, and that I would definitely be feeling the effort in the immediate aftermath, which I did. There were at least a few days where it was hard just to walk down my stairs to the kitchen. But yeah, I think for me it was more about as long as I didn't do anything permanently damaging, which I don't think I did. It was more about getting to really push some of those limits and like have the experience while I could.
Two things, I think. As a nurse, I don't think nurses did enough nutritional
Oh, wait,
classes anyway.
no,
so-
you guys should find me that. I just read it like online and football, yeah.
Yeah, and
I actually saw really few animals on this hike. I don't know. I didn't think much about that. Yeah, usually hiking through the night, I would see more. Maybe I was just really loud. There was a moment coming over Stratton Mountain where I was talking to myself, trying to keep myself awake because I was like actively falling asleep while I was walking. I was sleepwalking a little bit, and this was after I was on my 1% phone battery, so I could no longer check my maps when I was like not sure if I was on the trail anymore. Thankfully, the long trail is pretty well marked with white blazes the whole way. But I had a moment where I had definitely fallen asleep, woken back up, and I wasn't sure if I was on the trail or not anymore. And I was just searching for a white blaze to like have that moment knowing I was still on the trail. And I was also, talking to myself, kind of like giving myself some slaps in the face, trying to keep myself awake. And I finally got to the top of Stratton Mountain. And I didn't even realize I was summiting the mountain. It's kind of grassy and flat on top, and there's a fire tower. And I started walking by what I realized was someone's tent, and I had been kind of loudly keeping myself awake at this point. So I quickly quieted down, felt kind of bad. It was like 2 a.m, and I hear from inside this tent someone go, "Happy trails." Trail etiquette, that's fine. Yeah, so I didn't see many animals, so.
You mentioned the technological expectations around premier routes these days with your tracker, your watch, and your phone dying towards the end, and just curious about your thoughts around it, how that technological expectation affects the experience
Yeah.
of hard effort or just being outdoors in general.
Yeah, I've never worried so much about technology on a hike. It was kind of a nightmare. It was like planning wise, it was like, oh, I need a bigger battery than I normally have. And then like towards the end, it definitely was just this headache of like, okay, I have this much left in my battery pack, and I have 72 hours left on my watch, but only like 20% left on my Garmin, and it was okay as long as one of them stayed charged, but yeah, it was this whole logistical nightmare that I had never really had to deal with. And it did definitely, it was always in the back of my mind at the end, and there was one moment coming over Camel's Hump where I was going down the other side toward Montclair Glen. It's like the steep, bouldery part of Camel's Hump, and coming down those rocks, and I think I must have like bent my wrist enough that I like pressed pause on my watch and it was it for like 5 minutes, and I was so scared, like, oh, I don't have those 5 minutes of data, they might not accept my application, which thankfully wasn't the case, but
Did you carry a paper map?
no. No. I had it on my phone, which I do realize ended up dying and wouldn't have helped me much, but I also had been on the trail at least 2 other times, and several other times on different sections here and there, so I felt like I knew it pretty well and also knew that it was really well.
Were you running and walking?
I did a little bit of running. I think it was a lot of fast walking.
Fast running.
There's not a whole lot of parts that were like super runnable with a pack on. And yeah, I mean, especially towards the beginning when my pack was heavy, I think towards the middle was probably where I was able to run the most because my pack was getting lighter and I wasn't, totally, my feet were more in the like beginning phases of destruction. So like going over Mansfield, when I got up there, we ran a lot of that stretch, and then through the Red Lokes I ran a little bit, and I do think I had a weird moment on the last morning after I made it over Stratton and like going by Kelly Stand Road into Glastonbury. I ran the first like few miles into Glastonbury, and it was felt great that morning, and then my feet kind of hit me like a wall that afternoon.
Any falls?
Oh yeah. Not as many as I expected, but the first one happened like not even halfway through day one. I was on some bog boards, and they were slippery. And there wasn't even that much mud on the long trail this summer, but I saw the first like northbound through hikers that I had seen all day. It was after J Pass, so it was like past J Peak. And kind of that like section of, I don't know, it's between Hazen's Notch and J Pass, and I'm trying to think of any name in there, and I don't yeah, there you go. Please don't. And I was going over some bog boards. I see these northbound through hikers. I'm so excited to like say hi to someone and like, have a conversation in passing, and they stepped aside to let me go through the bog boards. And so I took like a little bit of a like long step, like leap onto what I thought was like a rock at the end of the mud. And it was just mud. And I sunk in a good ways, which also caused me to lose my balance. And I fell face forward with momentum into the mud. And scraped up my knee pretty well, and also got my shoe nice and dirty. So yeah, that was day one. And then I had a few other falls here and there, but nothing substantial.
Did you pick Sohu because it was more difficult?
Oh, I picked southbound because it was easier, I think. I did northbound the first time I hiked the long trail. I think there's gonna be a climb that's like worse going northbound and then one that's worse going southbound. I think overall, like southbound just has a couple of sections that logistically, if you're trying to move pretty fast, make more sense to be going that direction. One of the sections that really, for me, was like, felt so much easier southbound was the section near Camel's Hump, so like leaving Route 2. Going over Vanderford Bridge, I just think like that ascent of Camel's Hump is so much nicer than the other way. And going down the other way is better than going up it. And yeah, then the other section is like coming down into Route 2 is also a really long climb. You go northbound Route 2. So there's just a few sections.
Did I hear you say that when you were going through Breadloaf, that you were feeling almost like some elation or feeling really good? Do you think some of that might have been attributable to your having been rehydrated after being?
The state, the federal haunted, like, I don't really think they are. Yeah. But no, I think it could have been. I sat down and had a lot of really good water at thanks for helping me with my question.
Water's good.
What's next? No, it's okay. I am currently training to go for another FKT this summer over in New Hampshire. I had so much fun on the long trail, mostly just because it gave me a really good excuse to be on the long trail all the time. And so I was trying to think of another place that kind of like meant a lot to me in the same way that the long trail did. And a place that I would enjoy spending a lot of training time in. And so the 4,000 footers in New Hampshire were like my first hiking experiences, like going out and, peak bagging those. So yeah, I landed on the Deer Tisma and have my eyes on that. Tisma is the 4,000 footers in New Hampshire, but connected by like a single route.
Alright, one more. Thanks for coming.